Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this week's webinar, where we will be talking about selecting the right ASP and getting ready for the UAE e-invoicing. I'm very pleased to have Danielle joining us today. Danielle is the founder and managing director of Magna. It's her first business as well in the UAE, so congratulations on setting up your first business, Danielle. I hope you enjoy the journey of entrepreneurship. She has lots and lots of experience in the tax technology world. Do you want to just give us a few things that you've worked on and what you've done in your career to date so far?
Yeah, for sure. So for the last 13 and a half years, I've been in the tax and regulatory space. Started very much heavily working within the sort of banking and investment sector with clients who require different regulatory compliance needs across both the UK and Europe. And as the business grew out, different taxes obviously became more and more prevalent, more mandates came through, and the majority of my previous life was within the sort of VAT, Pillar 2 and operational transfer pricing space. But obviously as things have developed, e-invoicing neatly fits within that package because of the related data fields. So I've now found myself very heavily embedded in e-invoicing.
Yeah, so you're kind of a tax guru when it comes to the technology and processes, because you've obviously divulged into different types of tax, whether it's transfer pricing, VAT, corporation tax, and you work with not just small businesses but very large businesses as well.
Yeah, so, absolutely, and I think that's quite key because different businesses have different needs according to where they are within their own journey. I think mid-market is notoriously underserviced when it comes to tax technology and budgeting, to be very honest. And I think that's sort of the gap that we want to fill, is that mid-market to bigger firms is the niche that I sort of worked in over the last, more than a decade now, I hate to say.
No, well, you look great, so people should know that you've got much more experience than how you look. My name is 𝗚𝗏𝗏. I am the co-founder of 𝗙𝗂𝗃𝗀. We're a tax technology company, hopefully soon to become a ASP ourselves. Also the founder of 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃 Partners. We are a bookkeeping business back in Dubai, and also I host the 𝗙𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃 podcast. Daniel, I'm going to invite you to the podcast most likely in September. So we'll be in contact to kind of really. I want to learn more about your entrepreneurial journey as well as how you've kind of navigated through this kind of complicated world of tax as well. So that'd be super exciting for me to have you as a guest as well. Today's webinar is going to be very much about. We'll talk. We've been in the market since e-invoice has been announced, and so we'll talk about some of the insights and what we're seeing currently. We've spoken to myself and Daniel. We've spoken to lots of different companies at the moment, and there's a lot of experience shares that we can provide you in terms of what to do, what to look out for. We'll talk about the vendor, what type of vendor you want to go with, what to look for in an ASP, how to integrate, what kind of support you should be getting. Pricing is a big thing out here, so how should you be paying for your e-invoice software? The preparation is something that you shouldn't be taking lightly, and Danielle, I'm sure, will go into that in a lot more detail. And then kind of, you've got until January. Obviously, they've moved the deadline from July to October. That means that us accountants can probably have a summer holiday now and then come back and think about getting an ASP.
Nice for you, not so nice for the rest of us.
But it's a false sense of security, because don't forget, you've got your corporation tax return deadline in September as well. So although you've been given an extension, you probably do want to tie in who you're going to work with, and then you can start with the integrations as well. And then we'll do Q&A at the end. So feel free to put your questions on the comment section, and then we'll answer them at the end of the webinar. Just going to go back to your slides. So without further ado, Danielle, the the floor's yours.
Thank you. So just a little bit about Magna and the way that we operate. I think it would be good for us to sort of set the scene a little bit so that you understand where our experience is coming from, when we're talking with businesses like yourself. So Magna is a tax technology consulting firm. And I think that's very important to note, because whilst the team have an enormous amount of tax expertise, most of them come from a chartered accountant's background or from a tax accounting background. Our main focus when we're doing these implementation is on the delivery of tax and all the processes that sit around it. So a lot of the individuals within the team have had experience of, we've got a little world map there on the right-hand side, of delivering all sorts of tax technology globally, but specifically around e-invoicing, which is a topic of today, for example. We have got experience of either advisory in jurisdictions that haven't quite gone live yet, or full implementation experience in a number of jurisdictions across the globe. And now we're bringing that experience to the GCC, starting with our work that we're doing in the UAE, but we're also looking at various ways that we can help the Omani market. And as we know, Qatar has just come live now. Well, not come live, but they have said that they will be coming live soon enough. So that is another area that we'll be focusing on. And it is our plan to be able to do that across the GCC, so that businesses that operate across those regions will be able to benefit from the same experience across all. We are locally based, so our team is based here in Dubai. And the way that we work is we have two streams of the business. The one is around the vendor selection piece. So we help businesses who may be feeling overwhelmed by, for example, the 33 current ASPs that are in the market. But that number will be growing all the time. And I think it's very difficult sometimes when you're looking at tax technology to know what's right for your business. So that's a key part of the work that we do. So we work with businesses to understand that. And then we help them match them with the right technology partner. And as I say, e-invoicing in the main at the minute with the mandate looming, but we do that across all different taxes and finance systems as well. And the way that we like to operate is, as a business, we like to be an extension of your business. So we will often attach ourselves to your teams. We don't just work with finance and we don't just work with tax. We work across all the key stakeholders in the business. So we like to make sure that we've engaged tax, finance, IT, procurement where necessary, especially on the contracting side. And then we make sure that we do that delivery knowing full well what all the needs of the business are. And if you want to go to the next slide, please, Ryan.
Yeah, I just want to add something to what you mentioned as well. I think in the market, you have quite a few different players now who are doing what so supposedly you can do, right? So you've got a bunch of accounting firms that now are overnight tax technology specialists. And then you have a whole bunch of ASPs who can also provide that service as well, but it's a biased service. So, even us, we do have the ability to provide, look into your systems and do the same thing. But in honesty, we'd rather use someone like yourself to do that, because you will be the unbiased person that goes into the organization and really understands what the challenges are and the opportunities when you're implementing e-invoicing. And so I think that's one of the things that makes choosing someone like yourself different. And obviously you've done this for a very, very long time. So you've got not just in the e-invoice, but also working with VAT, with transfer pricing and corporation tax as well. And so I think it's very important for our audience to know specifically what you do. You're not doing audit services, you're not doing tax filing, you're providing this very specific niche type service. And it's very important to at least have a conversation with you to kind of understand how you can provide added value and benefits as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, you've said it here, but these are some of the areas that we focus on. So e-invoicing in the main at the minute. We also do Pillar 2, so there's a large proportion of multinational organizations. That is the focus for both this year and next year in terms of that filing. Corporation tax and VAT is the other area that we specialize in. Transfer pricing, which is really gaining some real traction in the region, especially with cross-border transactions and more organizations looking to expand their reach. And then ERP integrations as well. So that's both the actual assistance with the ERP being embedded with a piece of tax technology, or indeed if there was some requirements around some sort of vendor selection process, that's something that we could help with as well.
And you can do all the different types of ERPs, right? Whether it's SAP, Oracle, all of them.
Yeah, so our team has a very extensive background of working with different ERPs, some of the more sort of nuanced ones as well. There's a lot of regional ERPs that we also work with. And look, at the end of the day, I think technology can be difficult if you're not in it every day, and you have to sort of you don't have the frame of reference of looking at a large number of them. And let's be honest, a lot of people probably have seen one or two versions of an ERP in their lifetime, whereas our team, because they've worked across so many different industries, they've got the benefit of seeing the full spectrum really, and all the challenges and the benefits that come with those as well. So in terms of what we deliver, clients often say to us, my ASP or my technology partner is already doing the implementation. And look, there's a number of different ways to approach a new implementation of technology. The first part that's critically important in any technology delivery is the vendor that you're choosing to partner with in the first place. So when we work with customers, as I said before, we like to engage the entire business. So anybody that might be a stakeholder and have a vested interest in that technology coming into the organization, we like to make sure that we've engaged with them to at least make sure that their requirements are also catered for. There's no bigger failure of a technology implementation than forgetting a team or somebody not feeling that they've been engaged in the selection process. So we make sure that that's all, that sort of cross-functional alignment is there from the beginning. And then we go through a sort of 12-step process, helping organizations understand what their needs are. I've often sat with clients that have focused far more on the sort of technical side of things rather than the functional side of a technology selection, or more on the functional rather than the technical. And then IT pops their hand up and goes, hey, hold on a second, you haven't considered us and the sort of security elements of this, or the sort of actual data to API transfer. Then, of course, there's also the issue sometimes with the actual contracting itself. So some organizations actually can't contract with certain businesses because there might be restrictions in who they can work with, or the contract makeup doesn't suit with the terms that the business operates under. So we make sure that we have all that information up front, so we only put the right best of breed technology firms in front of the clients. The second part is around the readiness. So all very good and well doing the vendor selection process, but in conjunction with looking at what vendors are appropriate for your business, the readiness is critically important, because without actually setting your business up for success, understanding the as is and to be processes, you will come unstuck. And again, this comes down to looking at the existing processes of the business, looking at the functional readiness, the technical readiness to be able to adopt that technology, but also all the change management processes that might need to go around that delivery. Then we also do the actual implementation phase. So clients can pick and choose which part of the process they want to work with us. You don't have to do everything with us, but the implementation, we can work both with your existing vendor, so they can do the delivery, but we'll oversee that, or we can actually do the implementation. And we are an accredited partner for a number of technology firms, and we're actually working through some more of those accreditations now to make sure that we are able to deliver on behalf of some of those technology firms. And then finally, that sort of system health check. So some clients have said to me, I've already embedded the technology, but I'm not sure it's quite fit for purpose. Would you be able to come into our business and have a look and make sure that it's working in the way that was anticipated? But also, can you review our processes and make sure we haven't left anything out? Because anything that you bring into your business will have a knock-on effect to something else, right? And especially where there's this kind of intersection of data, that is the case when it comes to tax and finance. You want to make sure that whatever you've done hasn't adversely affected something somewhere else, or that isn't tallying, or you're unable to reconcile one way or the other.
I want to ask you kind of more about the selection process, right? Mm-hmm. So let's say I was to engage with you. What kind of things would you do to ensure that you find the right ASP for me? do you mind just going into that a bit more?
Yeah, look, I think you need to understand what you're trying to get from e-invoicing. And you and I have had this conversation before. There's kind of two schools of thoughts here. And on one hand, it's a compliance mandate, and businesses are treating it as such and just getting in a piece of technology that can do the validation and do the required outputs, and then deliver it to the authorities. And others are treating this more of it as a sort of transformation project. So it depends on which camp you're in. And the transformation project, actually, when you break down the elements of e-invoicing and the transparency that it's bringing into your business, there are some really real benefits that can be derived from bringing something like this into your business in a way that's meaningful. But again, it just depends both on your appetite for that. You might already have tools within the business that they cover that gap already, or you might not have the time, or you might not have the budget. So these are all things that you need to take into account. I think this first wave of companies that are in scope now for the 1st of Jan delivery or go live, I think those are the ones that really should be looking at it as more of a transformation program. And I appreciate that the second phase, for some businesses at the lower end, cost is going to be a very big factor for them. Where mid-tier firms might be kind of straddling the fence, deciding whether they want to go transformation or whether they just want to be compliant. But the way that we would normally work with firms is to understand that, and that's critically important, because you could either over-engineer or under-engineer your technology purchase. So we need to understand that first and foremost. The other thing that we would want to find out from you is any limitations around who you can and cannot do business with. So, for example, there's certain industries where data residency is particularly important, data sovereignty, particular security protocols that might need to be observed. Security should be the most primary consideration when it comes to something like e-invoicing. But at the same time, there's obviously levels of that as well, depending on the nature of the work that you're doing. What ERP you're using is also really important, because some ASPs have native connectors. Some of them are embedded within SAP, for example, so it makes an easier integration if you're an SAP user. Some clients might have multiple ERPs, and that's a challenge in itself, because now you need to create some sort of consolidation in order to get that data in. Whether you do that as a data lake or whether you just create individual APIs as a consideration. And then, of course, all these things have costs associated with them. So you need to consider what is your budget and how far you're willing to stretch that budget to fully automate. Because if you're a large organization with hundreds of thousands of transactions, API or full integration is probably the better way to go, rather than doing manual uploads or bulk pushes. But equally, that, again, as I say, comes at cost. A lot of the ASPs have also created connectors, which is another option. So that's something else, and they don't tend to be as expensive as a full API integration. And then, let's say, there's opportunity for bulk uploads and for using like an SFTP or using a manual upload. So a lot of firms will facilitate that. So those are the main sort of things where price starts to become, the price can go up. And then obviously transaction volume is a big thing. So whether you've got hundreds of thousands of transactions, because a lot of the ASPs will charge according to the transaction volume, or some of them will do it on a per instance basis.
I've also come across this situation where if you're using like an Oracle SAP, and I'm going a bit off topic, but
That's fine.
I'm having a conversation because I think it's beneficial for the audience as well. And I just would like to hear your perspective. I'm sure everyone else would love to hear your perspective, because you're in the trenches right now, right? Speaking to lots of different vendors and providers and companies and all of that. So it's love to, just picking your brain, basically. But one thing I've come across is recently is, if you're using SAP, Oracle, Dynamics, you would normally have like an implementation partner that implements it for you. Now, a lot of these implementation partners are now partnering with ASPs, and they are building the kind of the API or the connections between the ASP and the ERP system as well. What are your thoughts to that? I mean, for me, better the devil you know, right? You've got someone who you work with to build that API, but then again, you may not have a good relationship with them because maybe you did a project and they kind of, made a mess of it, or maybe they did great work, or maybe they're super expensive, right? And you don't want to work with them. How would you kind of, with that scenario, how would you tackle that? Or is it a good thing to do? What are your thoughts?
I think it depends. I think you're right about the relationship. I've had some clients recently who have been burned by third-party SAP or Oracle implementers that they've worked with, that they're in contract with them, and they've had to sort of like bulk buy or almost do like a retainer with them. So they kind of feel like they have no choice at the minute. So sometimes you just don't have a choice, and you have to make do with what you've got. And I appreciate that, especially from a budget situation. You don't want to, you have this credit sitting here that you're not using because you don't like somebody necessarily. But it is a difficult situation, and having a relationship with a technology partner, with a vendor, with an implementation partner that gets your business and understands you is so critically important, because I don't know, it feels a little bit like a marriage in a way. You're in a situation where you both are working towards the same goal, but you have to make sure that you're aligned. You absolutely have to make sure that you've got the same objectives. And I have had lots of clients that have been let down one way or another by implementation partners. And sometimes it's not even necessarily that the work is done wrong. It's just the expectation management, that alignment wasn't there from the beginning about what they were going to get out of it one way or another. Or they were oversold. That's a typical one, and we were oversold what we were getting. And they've done the implementation, but they haven't done the functional gap analysis, or they've only done the technical gap analysis, and that's not what we thought we were getting. So do I think it's the right thing or the wrong thing? I think it's situation dependent, and I think there are some very good implementation partners out there, and I've worked with some in my time, but it really just depends on the scenario, to be honest with you. You can't really. Sometimes it works out really well and you get really lucky, and sometimes it's a doozy.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Sorry, you can. I broke your flow. So
no, that's okay.
We've got the solution design, and I think business and technical.
Yes, we're finished. I think we're finished this particular one. I think the final one was just around on the next slide. It was just about getting in touch, to be honest. So those are just our details, which we can put up at the end. But there was something else that you said around vendor selection, which I think is quite important as well. I don't know if we're going to get onto this, or we might have missed the step in the process, but just something that I think clients should be really mindful of, that there are actually 3 pillars when it comes to choosing a vendor. And you need to make sure you've done the technical, the functional, and the security, categorization of those vendors. Somebody came to me the other day, and it's actually not the first time it's happened to me, where a client's gone, but what's your favorite vendor? Which one would you choose? And I was like, well, it doesn't work like that. It's like, I don't have a favorite. For me, the best thing is to understand your business. And they're like, oh, but I've got these 3 vendors, and they were completely polar opposite vendors. And I said, without actually sitting with you and going through your requirements and your current state, it's very difficult for me to go, you know what, they're my favorite. So you really have to have done the homework internally first before you start moving towards a vendor selection. And look, continue the vendor selection for sure. I'm not telling anybody to stop there, because it is a really huge part of the puzzle here. And you do need to be registered with that ASP. With the regulator. But I think running the 2 processes in parallel is super important to your readiness, along with your vendor selection process is really key at this time.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of confusion as well in the market, and I think we've got lots of inquiries, and they're kind of comparing us to other quotes that they've got as well. It's hard to it's hard. I can imagine it's hard for, when you're doing this for the first time, it's hard to kind of understand who's got the pluses, who's got the pros and cons, and it's hard to also understand who's got good experience, because everyone's on the same kind of is on a level in the sense that it's implemented in the UAE and the deadlines are now, and so it's hard for you. Once you're locked in, that you're locked in. You can change, obviously, but then then it'll be very difficult for you to change providers, especially if you have like, you know, APIs and connectors in place. And so I can imagine that's quite difficult for companies to really think about. In terms of, so
sorry,
many.
can I interrupt you there? Sorry, because that's a really important point, Rehan, is that again, it goes a bit back to the marriage comment that I made earlier. It's so important that you also understand the continuity plans with that ASP as well. So, you know, what happens if you decide that you don't want to continue with that ASP? What happens with your data? What are the storage arrangements that you've got in place with that vendor? You know, there's obviously rules depending on the nature of your transactions, whether you have to keep that data for 5 to 7 years. And in fact, it's even longer if you have any sort of audit or alert of an audit that might be taking place within your business. And understanding that that data storage and data accessibility piece is critically key for businesses, which I don't really think people are thinking about. The other part of that is also what happens once you go live. Like, what are the hypercare and go live support that you support SLAs that you can expect from vendors? You know, I've seen it so often that clients have had an implementation done, and this is in my previous life as well. When I was working for my previous organization, a lot of clients would come to us and say, I've had the implementation from another vendor. They took my money. I was signed into a 3-year contract with them, and I never heard from them again. It's my own devices, and this happens, right? Because they go off onto the next thing. So e-invoicing is hot right now. But what happens when the next one comes along? When e-invoicing comes BAU? Then how are they planning on managing these clients in the future? And what are the SLAs? What are the service SLAs? How do you get the support that you need? When are they? You know, what is the resolution time around that? You know, I've in my time I've also managed support teams, product support teams in the back of the delivery team, and I really like that I've had that experience of managing both sides of that. So I managed the implementation team and I managed the support team, and I've made real sure that they were both aligned in terms of how they took on clients after go live, because otherwise you can fall through the cracks. And they think that, you know, clients think that they have to go back to the implementation team. Implementation team thinks that they're sitting with the support team, and you can just get lost in the process. And that's a really, really important thing as well. Just understand that businesses plan around supporting you in the future, because there will be things that come up. You know, you might have another entity that you need to onboard, and you might have a new ERP in the business, or you're acquisitive, so you're constantly taking on entities and ERPs. How is that going to be set up? What are the service agreements around that? What are the ongoing costs around that sort of thing? All very, very important points.
Yeah, no, great points like that you mentioned. Everyone's the elephant in the room is price, right? So everyone's like shopping around and trying to find the best pricing, and there are some players who are, you know, maybe taking an advantage a little bit of this new regulation. How do you approach pricing? What is your, for, let's say I'm an accountant and I'm working for you know, for my business, and I'm trying to find the ASP because I have to be the one who finds it before I share it with my internal organization. What kind of things do you think will help them assess the price better? Because you have pricing for, like, sometimes you have quotes and they give you an impact assessment. Sometimes they give you a onboarding fee, right? They give you an implementation fee. Then sometimes there's an implementation API fee, but they don't connect to your ERP system. They're just opening up so you can connect as well. Then you may need to build your own API. You may need to look at processes as well. And so this is something that's obviously very, very dear and near to accountants, right? Because they love saving money. They have to save money, right? That's one of our jobs, right? So how should they approach? What kind of advice can you give when they're assessing pricing? Is there anything you can share in terms of your secret sauce? You know, one of the things obviously best practice is to get quotes and to analyze, maybe use a bit of AI to kind of analyze it for you. But But what kind of advice would you give to, you know, the tax manager or the accountant on assessing price?
Yeah. Again, my first and foremost is what are you trying to achieve by bringing in the technology? If you're looking for value add, then I can immediately tell you within 2 or 3 questions whether this is your cohort of ASPs. And that's not, if you're not looking for added value and you just want to get the job done, then this is your cohort of ASPs. So that's just come with experience. It's come with me working with a large number of the ASPs in the market, and I know where their flex is around those sorts of things. There are, and that's the thing, is like, if you're not going to use all the bells and whistles, why should you pay for them? Then you just really want something that's going to, you know, do your 5-corner model, make sure that it's super secure, and allow you to manage the sort of exception handling well. So that's the main thing. If you are a high volume transaction business, a lot of the ASPs actually charge per transaction. But what they'll do is they will tend to bucket it. So they will say, if you have X number of transactions, then we will charge you this. But if you go over, then you move into the next bracket, then we'll charge you Y. And I actually find those ones are quite, I mean, they are what they say they are. Do you know what I mean? The only thing that's a little bit difficult is where there's a true up. So you might think that you're going to be spending X and you have a particularly busy quarter or year, whatever the case is, and you go over that bucket. Then you might find yourself in the next category with knowing that you might not be staying in that next category. So those sorts of things, I would say, just be very clear about what you're signing yourself up for, and also have a tolerance. Try and build a tolerance into your contract. So if you sort of 5 to 10 invoices over, and you are a high transaction volume business, then that's a good negotiation point, right? Because it's not something that's going to be ongoing, but equally, you know that you're not normally over that threshold. So I would say have that conversation with the client to make sure you build that into your contract and really understand those thresholds well. I've been burned with those sorts of things before. The other thing that I would say is impact assessment. What does that mean? I keep hearing this word impact assessment, and do you know what it means? From my understanding from a lot of the ASPs is we're going to do a matching exercise. We're going to take the mandatory fields and we're going to look at your data and we're just going to tell you what's missing. Now that's not an impact assessment.
Yeah.
That's a mix and match exercise. You know, and if you're paying a lot of money for that, that you could probably do that yourself in the nicest possible way. You could probably do that yourself. But if you're getting more than that, and that's, again, I don't think that ASPs have the bandwidth to be able to do more than that, is the honest truth, which is why they partner with businesses like us. Then that's great if that's what you're getting for your money, but really dig into what that impact assessment is going to deliver. Because again, I've seen clients burned where they thought that this impact assessment was going to, you know, expose all the weaknesses in their system, and it was going to tell them how what processes were going to be impacted, and they're going to get some assistance around this change management piece. And the ASP is like, no, I don't have time for that. I've got 600 other customers I need to deliver to. An impact assessment is basically a gap analysis, pressed up, and some pretty close. So I think just be really, really conscious of what you are getting at every step of the way. And some ASPs do go all out, and they roll out the red carpet and they give you that full shebang. I can tell you it's really unlikely, because all ASPs are critically busy at the minute. Their resources will be constrained. And as we get closer and closer to the mandate, it will be the case. So try and either create a sort of team internally that can manage that impact assessment and gap analysis yourself. Also, then you have a bit more control over, you know, what's missing and how you're going to remediate it and that sort of thing. And make sure your IT team is involved for that conversation. That's also just another point that's quite important, is I've seen businesses haven't geared their IT teams up for what's coming in terms of that, you know, the data remediation, the gaps that might need to be filled, and time apportionment that they'll need from their IT team. And IT has already decided that they're doing 100 other projects this year. So if you haven't had the conversation with your IT team, now is the time to have that, and just make sure that you've got them block booked for the time that you need to do the project. We've also got Eid coming up, summer holidays. There's a whole lot of things coming on the horizon, and you know, 31st of December is not that far out. So just make sure that you've block booked them. But yeah, so those are the main things that I'd say around pricing is transaction volumes. What are you trying to achieve with the platform? That ERP integration piece, whether you want to do ERP, whether you want to do connectors, or whether you want to do an SFTP, And then you've got the option as well to do manual uploads, which unless you're a very, very low transaction business, I probably wouldn't recommend just from a sort of continuity perspective.
You'd be surprised. Maybe an ASP quotes for a connector like so much money, and then the business like, I'm just going to throw a person at it. Just literally, their job is going to be.
Yeah, time will also dictate that, Rehan, because you might be in a situation where like time is against me, or my connector's broken, or the API hasn't worked. Then it is very important that you have an ASP that can actually take a manual upload, because that's the other thing, is make sure that all your bases are covered. And maybe you don't want to start with an API now. Maybe that's something you want to work towards, or maybe you don't want an API at all, because then you've got somebody integrating into your ERP system, which is also becomes different security protocols. So these are all considerations when signing up with an ASP from a pricing perspective. And then there's one other charge that you need to be aware of, which is the annual maintenance charge. And make sure you know what you're getting from your annual maintenance charge, because when you get that, sometimes it's just for the connectors or the API. Sometimes it's for any upgrades to the technology that might be needed as a result of regulatory changes. But just make sure that you've considered those two elements as well. Like what are you getting for your AMC, and what is it covering?
And obviously, your first 100 invoices is free, mandated by so the Ministry of Finance gave us a present of 100 invoices free. So make sure that you raise that with your ASP as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Before we'll have Q&A shortly. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comment section, and I'll read it out and I'll share it with Danielle. I've got one more question. When you're dealing with an ASP, what would you say is a non-negotiable that they have to fulfill from your point of view?
Look, so the good thing about the FTA bringing in accredited service providers is that they have all gone through a really rigorous process, right? So in terms of like their actual ability to handle the 𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗃 model, you would think that everything has been rigorously tested, and from that perspective, and that they've been compliant with at least the basics of what is required in able to be able to transmit the data effectively and do the required validation checks. I think for me, security is probably going to be quite a key component in who you choose as an ASP. You're taking and receiving invoices via various systems, and making sure that you've got the sort of rigor and control around that is really important. Both from your own internal controls, so those will have to be beefed up, but also in terms of the ASP that you're working with. That's especially if you plan on doing a sort of API or connector model. You're opening up your ERP, and again, that might not necessarily be the worst thing in the world if you're just treating the ASP as a transmission tool rather than actually housing the data for you. So there are options around that as well. But just make sure that you've done all of your due diligence around the certifications that they've got, the penetration testing, also the ability, and I say security, but I also mean, their ability for load. Can they take hundreds and thousands of transactions? What's the sort of lag time on that from a processing perspective? Both those two things will be really important, especially with real-time reporting. So yeah, I would say make sure that you've had a good technical evaluation as well as functional. Don't choose something because it looks pretty, please, because I've seen this too many times. I've seen clients go, but it looks really nice. I'm like, that's not the reason to pay something.
Yeah, front end work is easier than back end work. So cool. We don't have any questions, and I think it seems like you've comprehensively answered the whole question about what to do when selecting the right ASP. Do you have anything you want to close with?
Just a final statement, really. Just because the FTA moved out the mandate, please don't stop your vendor selection process. That's really, really important that you continue with that. But I'd like you to do it with eyes wide open. And in order to do that, make sure that you're doing the readiness assessment alongside that ASP selection. There are now currently 33 ASPs in the market, and there will be more added over the course of the next couple of months and indeed the rest of the year. So just make sure that you are doing your due diligence both internally in line with your ASP selection, so that you're getting a partner that can really support you on your journey. You know, especially if you find yourself having wider aspirations of growing the business in the future. Does that ASP do cross-border? What are the jurisdictions that they operate in? And then also just making sure that you've given some thought to the ASPs, like Lineage. What else have they done before? What other tax technology have they been involved in? Because e-invoicing, whilst it's making a lot of noise at the minute, it's not a standalone requirement. It has an impact on other taxes alongside it, other business processes, other finance responsibilities. So just make sure that you're looking at it holistically in terms of what you're doing to bring something into your business.
Oh, no, thank you very much for sharing your insights and your secret sauce as well. Of course, we've put on the screen how they can get in touch. They can also, our viewers can also get in touch via LinkedIn as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, no, just want to say thank you very much, and hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks very much, Ryan.
Take care, everyone.